Welcome back everyone, it's time for another episode of Dev Time. Today we are going to finish the expanded save system. We started it last time when we wrote a function that listed all the files in a folder. Today we are going to add some more code, allowing us to make multiple saves that have actual timestamps on them, so that we can go back and see which was the last save we made. Currently, we have a system that looks a little bit like this. It doesn't allow us to, if we save, it doesn't really change the name of the file. It just uses a very generic name like save2 or save3. But we have a multi-file structure here. It allows us for 3 save games beyond the quick save slot. And that's what we're going to expand upon a little bit. It's not very fancy yet, but we could add, having 3 save slots is just an arbitrary number. We could have as many as we want. And that's not really the difficult part. The difficult part is basically interacting with your hard drive and your system and doing things like creating files, moving files, renaming them, and so forth. In particular today, I think we're going to write a function that allows us to actually take a file that's already on your hard drive, overwrite the data in that file, and then rename the file. That's what we are going to try to do today. Let's first just look at the anatomy a little bit of the scene. This is sort of the basic skeleton of the save game screen. It has a background image, not necessarily this one. We change it dynamically depending on what kind of scene we are in, or what kind of state. And then we have a list of buttons here that are interactable, and this is where we actually list the save games that we can use, that we can save to or load from. And this works by whenever we go to the save or the load menu, the state controller that controls sort of the game state sends us to something called, for instance, the save menu state or the load menu state, depending on if we are saving or loading. And then that state it queries the SKALD save control, and it uses the function we wrote the last time, the method called getSavePathContent, meaning that it queries the save control and has it make a list of all the save files that are currently in our save directory. I'm just going to move it onto screen here, in this directory. So when we saw how the menu worked earlier, these were the files that we saw listed, and if we had added another file, we would have gotten another file here. So that's actually putting the function we wrote last time to use. And what it does is that if there are fewer than 5 files in the save folder, it will also add a few paths that are non-existent, that are just show the text empty. If we look here, hold on, I'll show you what I mean. Let's see here. Here we see there is an empty slot. If we click this, it would create a new save file. If we try to load from it, nothing happens because it's empty. If we try to load from one of these, for instance the quick save, it actually loads a save game. And that's basically how it works. It takes the list that we get from the names of the files. It adds empty entries until the list is at least 5 entries long, and then it puts that list into these different buttons. So we get one button for the back command if we want to go back to the main screen, and then the other is like the quick save, save 1, save 2, save 3, the empty save, and so forth. But we're going to make it a little bit more advanced now, because as you saw, it just gave very generic names to the save games, and I wanted to make something a little bit more advanced. I wanted to sort of tag the saves as you save with the in-game date, for instance. Loading, just to get that out of the way, is very, very simple the way it works, because the way it works is that whenever you press one of these buttons, a variable called input index will be updated, and the input index corresponds to the button. If this button is pressed, it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. And then we will basically just, whenever the input index is not 0 or greater than 0, it will look through the option list, which contains the names of all, which is what we built here, the names of all the files in the folder plus the empty tags if the list is shorter than 5. And as long as the input list we are getting back, as long as the space in the sort of the option list isn't an empty tag, if it's not the empty tag, it means that we're actually clicking the name of a real file, and then we will just load that file using the game load function that we haven't really examined yet, but take my word for it. This function will load a file with a given name from this folder. So if we pass save2 to this function, we will load that file. Now that's the load menu state in a nutshell. So we're not really going to look at that anymore. Don't let it confuse you, but just so you know how it works. The save state works a little bit different, but it's almost the same. If the input index is greater than 0, meaning that we have pressed any button except the first, because the first button is the back button, if you have pressed any of these buttons, we will get the file name associated with that button. If that button is an empty tag, then we will assign a fresh name to the file. And the fresh name will be just save, and then literally the input index we're using. So if this button is empty, we click it, we pass the input index of 3 to the function. So we will create a file called save3, and then we will save using that as the file name. If it isn't an empty tag, if it's not an empty tag, it means that we will save to a name that already exists. For instance, we will be getting save2 from this function, and when we save to save2, it will overwrite that file. And this is fine. This is the way the system works now, but it's a little too primitive. I would like it to be a little bit more advanced, a little bit more sophisticated. And what I would really like I said, I wanted to tag it with the in-game date, and that means that we have to override the name of the file. We have to update the name of the file. We can't just keep creating new files. I don't want that, because I want a limited number of slots. If we want more slots, we can add them later, but I wouldn't want it to just add a new file every time we try to save. So if we had just made a new save game here, if we had just saved and every time we just passed a new name, that wouldn't really do it, because we would end up with a huge amount of save games here. Every save would be a new file, and that's not exactly what we want. We wanted to either create a new save file if it's an empty slot, or to override a save file if it's already an existing save file. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to start off by going to the save control class. This is basically a toolbox that allows us to do different things with saving, such as getting the content of the save folder, or actually literally saving files and loading files. And I think this is where we're also going to add a function that allows us to pass as its parameter the name of a file, and if that file exists, we create a new name for that file. So let's just start by creating a new static method. I don't think we'll use a return type. We might add one later. We'll see. We can call it rename save. And then the parameters will be first the let's call it file name, in reference that we are actually, it's the name of an actual file here. And then the other parameter can be, for instance, new name, like so. And I think we are going to wrap this in a try catch construct, because since we are going to use, we're actually going to manipulate files on our systems, that can sometimes be error prone, and I'm not that familiar with it, so we might get different kinds of exceptions. And to allow us to log and debug properly, I think we'll just do this so it fails gracefully, and we can instead just start collecting bugs once they pop up. I'm not really going to implement that fully right now, but let's just, for the sake of completeness, at least add just a debug function that logs the error here. Yeah, let's not think anymore about this for now. But in the try bracket there, we're going to use the system IO namespace. So be sure you have it there. We'll use that. And let's see. So what we're going to do is we're going to use in system IO. There is a class called file, and it has a method called move, and it takes as its parameter a file name and a new name. And this does exactly what we want the function to do. It takes an existing file and it moves it. It literally moves it to a new path, which also means that it basically renames the file. It doesn't copy the file. It's just another way of saying that it renames the file. So, but the problem so far, this looks good on the surface, but there is a little problem here, and that is that the file name that we are passing in is shortened. It's just this little piece here. It doesn't have the file type or the complete path, the complete system path to the file. So we have to add that now to make it actually work. So let's take file name and update it. And if you remember from last time, we have a handy little method here called getSavePath, which basically gives us the system path to the file, to any save file. And then we add file name, and then we also have a variable here called file type that we use to append literally the file type. So now we will have constructed a full, complete save path to any file name that we pass in here. And we will do the same thing with the new name. So the new name also becomes a complete file path. Like so. And like so. Now this should work. This should work. Let's just look over it. It takes the file name, it makes it a complete path. Does the same with the new name, and then it moves the file from the old path to the new path. And if there is an exception, if it doesn't work, if there's something wrong, it will log the error, and we can later add some more code here in the catch. Yeah, that should work fine. So now let's go back to the menu state. And let's just do a let's have a look here now. I think what we have to start with here now is that we have to assume that no matter what the list name is now, we're always going to update it. If the list name is just an empty tag, then we will for sure assign a new name. that's a no-brainer. And also, even if the list name that we get is from a button being clicked that already contains a save file, we're always going to, at least in the way the system works now, we're always going to update that name. And I think we will just update it, like I said earlier, to have it be like save one and then just a date string, so that we can always see when the save was made in game. That's not a perfect system, and it's something we would have to change later, but at least it allows us to demonstrate how we can update the names of files. Later, we would probably add some functionality where the user would be able to enter their own name in the file. You could call it SKALD1 or SKALD2 or whatever you like. But just now, just for the example, let's just use a save and then just a date string attached to it. So let's see if it's list name. And it's an empty tag. I think we can just save and then game save, and we need to pass a new name in here. And let's just, because since we need to make a new name no matter what, let's make it a local variable up here. I think we could make the name, for instance, save, and then use the input index so that we get a, because that allows that will make the files be sorted when we get them. So it's nice to have there. And then probably an underscore. Yep. And we can actually refer to we have a calendar object. And that has a method called, I think it's even called get save date stamp. Yeah, it does. So if it's empty, we pass this new name, and it should make a save game that has a date stamp on it. Let's just try this before we do the part where we override existing save names. Let's just see if this works. Okay, so yeah, so I had a little bug there because I actually forgot to comment out this one just for now. So we created two save files every time we saved. That wasn't really as intended, but let's see again now. Okay, so if we try to save over an empty file, I think that worked. Let's just try to load. See now that we have created a file that has that's called save for, and it has the day, hour, and minute at the time of saving. Day, hour, minute. So that worked perfectly. That worked perfectly. So let's go back into the code now and make sure that we also update. If we try to save, if it's not an empty tag, if we try to save over a file that already has a valid name, we add an else here. And what we do then is that we first save to the path that we are already referencing. Literally, if we are trying to save override this, and this is called save to, for instance, first we will save to save to. We won't do anything with the name, so we will use the name that has been passed in. Just pass it as a function, save the game normally, and then we will take that file using list name to reference it, and we will use the function that we just wrote in the save control, and we will pass that name to the save control along with the new name. So we will basically just do this. List name, and then we will also pass the new name that we created up here. Like so. And that should rename the file. So at first it saves to the old file, overriding the old file without changing the name, and then it takes that old file and then it renames it, and then we have exactly what we want. So let's save and try to see if this works. Okay, let's see here. So let's try to overwrite save to, for instance. That worked beautifully, I think. Yep, it did. Now I've overwrote it and it added the date stamp. That's perfect. And if we try to overwrite save 3, overwrite save 3, that should also have changed it. So now all of them are here with date stamps. And if we see in the save folder, we see that we have the save games exactly as we wanted. And that's perfect. Okay, so I think that's it for now, actually. I'm pretty happy with the way it works. I think it will be like this for a couple of iterations of the alpha. Like I said, we might later add some kind of functionality here to allow the player to change the name of the save file and so forth. That would be pretty nice, but that's for another video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and check out the devlog on skaldrpg.com as well. Have a nice day. See you later. Bye bye.